Psychological analysis of Tamika Chesser. Detailed examination of impulsivity, emotional regulation, and dissociation. How fame and stress may have affected decision-making. Comparison with similar criminal cases involving emotional instability. Forensic and legal lessons. Detailed breakdown of blood spatter patterns, post-mortem dismemberment, and fire investigation. How evidence interpretation shapes jury decisions and trial strategies. Importance of forensic timelines in establishing intent and awareness. Media and public influence. Role of social media in shaping public opinion. Ethical challenges of reporting high-profile domestic homicide cases. Influence of celebrity status on trial perception and societal reactions. Broader societal implications. Long-term impact on domestic violence awareness and prevention programs. Changes in mental health advocacy inspired by the case. Policy and community initiatives to address early signs of domestic conflict. Educational and academic application. How the case is now studied in law schools, forensic programs, and psychology curricula. Use in seminars and workshops on criminal behavior, evidence handling, and mental health considerations. Final reflections, legacy, and long-term implications. Years after the events of June 17, 2025, the Tamika Chesser case remains one of the most discussed criminal cases in Australia, both for its brutality and the unique intersection of celebrity, mental health, and domestic violence. Part 10 examines the long-term legacy, societal lessons, and ongoing implications for legal, psychological, and media discourse. Post-trial reflections. Following the conclusion of the trial. Legal proceedings. Tamika's sentencing reflected both the severity of the crime and consideration of psychological factors. Public perception. While some continued to debate her motives, most media outlets treated the case as a cautionary tale highlighting domestic tension and mental health challenges. Personal impact. The families involved, including Tamika's and Julian's, faced ongoing trauma and media scrutiny, requiring long-term counseling and support. The case became a lens through which society examined domestic violence, fame, and the consequences of unresolved psychological distress. Long-term societal lessons. Several long-term lessons emerged from the Tamika Chesser case. 1. Domestic violence awareness. Early signs of tension, such as emotional volatility or repeated arguments, can escalate if not addressed. Community awareness programs emphasize the importance of intervention before minor conflicts spiral into tragedy. Schools, workplaces, and local organizations incorporated discussions about healthy communication and conflict resolution into educational programs. 2. Mental health recognition. The psychological complexity of Tamika's behavior highlighted the importance of identifying emotional instability, impulsivity, and potential dissociation. Mental health initiatives encouraged people to seek support for stress, anxiety, and emotional regulation, particularly in high-pressure environments. Public campaigns stressed that mental health support is a preventive tool. The media aftermath, societal discussions, and lessons learned. Even after the courtroom proceedings concluded, the Tamika Chesser case continued to dominate headlines, social media conversations, and national debates. Part 9 explores the broader societal impact, the role of media, and the lessons that emerged from this tragic and high-profile crime. Media coverage after the trial. The trial had already drawn massive attention due to Tamika's celebrity background, and post-trial media coverage intensified. National news outlets published analyses of courtroom behavior, forensic evidence, and psychological assessments. Featured commentary from legal experts about the implications of the verdict and sentencing. Social media platforms. Thousands of posts debated her guilt, mental health, and the ethics of celebrity culture. Memes, commentary threads, and hashtags fueled both support and criticism, highlighting the polarization of public opinion. Documentaries and podcasts. Within weeks, journalists and content creators produced in-depth documentaries and podcast episodes detailing the crime, investigation, and trial. Focus was often on psychological factors, domestic dynamics, and the forensic reconstruction of the events. This coverage kept the case in public consciousness, shaping perceptions of Tamika, Julian, and the broader issues involved. Societal discussions. The Tamika Chesser case sparked important discussions across multiple domains. 1. Domestic violence awareness. Experts emphasized that escalating conflicts, emotional volatility, and subtle warning signs in relationships could lead to extreme violence. Campaigns encouraged couples to seek help early, highlighting support networks and hotlines for domestic disputes. The case reinforced the importance of early intervention and public education about domestic conflict dynamics. 2. Mental health considerations. Psychological assessments revealed the complexities of emotional instability, impulsive jury deliberations, verdict, and societal impact. As the trial of Tamika Chesser progressed, the focus shifted from presentation of evidence to jury deliberation, with legal teams emphasizing both intent and psychological factors. The case had already captured national attention, and the final stages of the trial would determine the legal consequences of the brutal events of June 17, 2025. Jury deliberation process. After weeks of testimony, the jury was tasked with assessing intent versus impulsivity in the homicide, considering the impact of Tamika's mental health evaluation, weighing forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and CCTV footage, determining if post-crime actions reflected premeditation or stress-driven responses. Deliberation atmosphere. The jury spent several days reviewing evidence and discussing the implications of Tamika's psychological state. Forensic reports, including blood pattern analysis, dismemberment, and fire investigation, were central to understanding the severity of the crime. Discussions included interpretations of her calm behavior post-crime, her walking with dogs and bag, and what it implied regarding intent. Legal considerations. Key legal issues included premeditation versus impulse. Did Tamika plan the homicide, or was it a sudden escalation of a domestic argument? Dismemberment and attempts to conceal the body were considered strong evidence of deliberate action. Mental health mitigation. Psychological evaluations suggested emotional instability and possible dissociation. The defense argued this should reduce culpability or influence sentencing, while the prosecution emphasized awareness and deliberate post-crime behavior. Degree of violence. The brutality of Julian's death, including post-mortem dismemberment, was central to establishing the severity of the offense. Evidence of the fire was considered in terms of attempted concealment or destruction of evidence. Public and media scrutiny. Throughout delibera, courtroom proceedings, testimonies, and public debate, the trial of Tamika Chesser was one of the most anticipated criminal cases in recent Australian history. The combination of a celebrity defendant, the brutality of the crime, and complex psychological factors created intense public interest. Part 7 examines the courtroom proceedings, the arguments presented by both sides, and how the media and public reacted during the trial. Opening statements. The trial began with opening statements from both the prosecution and defense. Prosecution. Prosecutors emphasized the premeditation and brutality of the crime. They highlighted Tamika's post-crime actions, including leaving with a bag and walking the dogs, as evidence that she was aware of her actions and attempted to conceal the crime. CCTV footage and witness accounts were presented to support the timeline of the crime. Defense. The defense team argued that the crime was not premeditated. Psychological evaluations were cited to suggest emotional instability and potential diminished responsibility. They painted a picture of a volatile domestic environment where tensions escalated quickly, suggesting that Tamika may have acted impulsively rather than with forethought. These opening statements set the tone for a trial that would explore both legal and psychological dimensions. Witness testimonies. Several key witnesses took the stand, each contributing pieces of the puzzle. Neighbors testified about arguments, raised voices, and unusual activity in the weeks leading up to the crime. Described seeing Tamika walking her dogs late at night, sometimes carrying bags, which later correlated with CCTV evidence. Friends and acquaintances shared observations of Tamika's erratic behavior and mood swings. Recounted her ambitions, emotional volatility, and the tension in her relationship with Julian. Police officers and firefighters provided testimony on the discovery of Julian's body and the fire inside the U. Court proceedings, charges, and mental health assessment. After the discovery of Julian Story's body and the subsequent forensic evidence, the Port Lincoln police moved swiftly to formalize charges against Tamika Chesser. The case, already high-profile due to her celebrity background, now transitioned from an investigation into the legal and judicial phase, where the severity of the crime and her mental state became central issues. Formal charges. In the weeks following her arrest, prosecutors formally charged Tamika with murder. The central charge, based on evidence linking her to the fatal attack on Julian. Forensic analysis, CCTV footage, and witness testimony formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. Dismemberment and concealment of a body. The discovery of Julian's skull weeks later confirmed deliberate attempts to conceal the crime. This added an additional layer of severity to the legal proceedings. Potential fire-related offense. The small blaze inside the residence raised suspicions of evidence destruction. While minor, it became part of the broader narrative of post-crime behavior. These charges placed Tamika at the center of a serious criminal case, with penalties that could include life imprisonment if convicted. Pretrial proceedings. During pretrial hearings, several procedural elements were addressed. Bail and custody. Given the violent nature of the crime and potential flight risk, Tamika was remanded in custody. Authorities also considered her psychological state, ensuring she received medical attention as needed. Evidence disclosure. Prosecutors began sharing forensic evidence, CCTV footage, and witness statements with Tamika's defense team. The evidence clearly established her presence at the crime scene and movements immediately afterward. Public statements and media restraints. Due to national media attention, judges imposed restrictions on public statements to ensure a fair trial. Social media speculation while with investigation, forensics, and discovery of remains. Following the shocking discovery of Julian Story's body on June 19, 2025, the Port Lincoln police quickly launched a comprehensive homicide investigation. The case's complexity, coupled with the high-profile status of Tamika Chesser, made it one of the most publicized and closely monitored criminal cases in recent Australian history. Initial response. After firefighters discovered Julian's mutilated body, authorities immediately secured the scene. Key steps included crime scene containment. Police cordoned off the property, limiting access to preserve evidence. Preliminary observations. Investigators noted the severity of the injuries, the unusual nature of the mutilation, and the presence of a small fire that had occurred inside the home. Arrest of Tamika Chesser. Authorities found her in the garden area, appearing emotionally unstable and distressed. She was taken into custody without incident. At this stage, the police had a suspect, but much of the case still depended on forensic evidence, witness statements, and the reconstruction of events. Forensic analysis of the crime scene. The forensic team worked meticulously to reconstruct the events inside the home. Blood pattern analysis. Bloodstains indicated the altercation occurred primarily in the bathroom. The pattern suggested blunt force trauma followed by dismemberment, confirming the extreme violence of the incident. Fire investigation. Forensic fire experts examined whether the fire had been accidental or deliberate. While the flames were small, investigators concluded that the fire may have been intended to destroy evidence, though it was insufficient to do so completely. Collection of physical evidence. Investigators seized multiple items including a bag Tamika carried during her departure, which contained clothing and other personal items. Objects that could have been used in the crime. Forensic traces like fingerprints, hair, and DNA. The night of the crime, June 17, 2025. The night of June 17, 2025, marked a turning point in the lives of Tamika Chesser and Julian Story. What had been weeks of tension, unresolved arguments, and psychological strain would culminate in an event that shocked the community and captured national attention. The evening of June 16th. The couple's interactions in the hours leading up to midnight had been tense yet seemingly ordinary on the surface. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices intermittently, doors slamming, and footsteps moving rapidly within the unit. Social media activity indicated that Tamika was restless, intermittently posting and scrolling through content, while Julian attempted to maintain calm. By late evening, both retired for the night, but the underlying tension had not dissipated. Psychologists analyzing the case would later describe the atmosphere as a pressure cooker, a household where emotions, unaddressed conflicts, and mental stress had accumulated dangerously. Around midnight, the critical moment. Police reports and forensic evidence suggest that the incident escalated around midnight on June 17th. While the exact sequence remains partially unclear, investigators have pieced together several key elements. Tamika and Julian were alone in their home. An argument occurred, reportedly triggered by ongoing relationship tensions, financial disputes, or emotional volatility. The argument escalated into physical violence, resulting in Julian's death. The nature of the incident, later described in forensic reports as brutal and disfiguring, shocked investigators. Julian's body was severely harmed, with dismemberment occurring after death. The fire. Following the incident, a small fire broke out inside the home. Whether the fire was accidental or intentional remains part of the ongoing investigation, but it served as a catalyst for discovery. June 19th, firefighters responded to a report of smoke and minor flames. Upon entering the home, they the days leading up to the crime. The tragedy of June 17, 2025, did not occur in isolation. Behind the shocking headlines were weeks, even months, of tension, disagreements, and psychological strain. In this section, we will examine the events leading directly up to the night of the crime, providing context to understand how a relationship that once seemed ordinary descended into violence. Early June 2025, rising tensions. By June 2025, Tamika Chesser and Julian Story were living together in their Port Lincoln home, a modest residence that had become the stage for increasingly volatile interactions. Observers close to the couple noted that small arguments had begun escalating more frequently. Tamika's behavior appeared increasingly erratic. She would switch moods rapidly, sometimes affectionate and playful, other times angry or withdrawn. Social media activity reflected this volatility. Posts that were once glamorous and calculated became more impulsive and provocative. Friends noticed that she was spending long hours online and seemed restless at home. Julian, for his part, tried to maintain calm. He had a pattern of withdrawing from conflicts, attempting to de-escalate situations rather than confront them. This approach, while usually effective in minor disputes, may have created an unbalanced dynamic where tensions simmered beneath the surface, unaddressed. Relationship conflicts. Several factors contributed to the increasing tension between the couple. Lifestyle differences. Tamika, a former reality star, sought attention and validation from her public presence. Julian preferred privacy and a routine life. Their conflicting priorities created friction in daily decision-making. Financial disagreements. Although Tamika had income from modeling and online platforms, she also had expenses related to her personal projects. Arguments reportedly occurred regarding money, budgeting, and spending habits. Social media pressure. Tamika's frequent online activity CRE. Julian's Story and their relationship. While Tamika Chesser had spent years in the public eye, her partner Julian Story was a man who preferred a quieter life. Understanding Julian's background and personality is essential to understanding the dynamics that eventually led to the tragic events of June 2025. Julian Story, a private life. Julian Story was born in 1985 in South Australia. Unlike Tamika, he grew up in relative obscurity, with no ambitions of fame or public attention. From an early age, Julian was described as calm, analytical, and introspective. He enjoyed routines, valued stability, and preferred small circles of friends to large crowds. He worked in various fields over the years, but his professional life was largely conventional. He was not a wealthy man, nor was he seeking social prominence. Yet he had an aura of reliability, a quiet competence that drew people to him. Friends described him as trustworthy and loyal, someone who would go out of his way to help those he cared about. Despite these positive qualities, Julian's personality had its vulnerabilities. He could be overly accommodating, avoiding confrontation even when necessary. He sometimes struggled to assert himself, especially when dealing with strong-willed individuals like Tamika. The meeting. Tamika and Julian first met in 2018, introduced by a mutual acquaintance during a social event in Adelaide. At the time, Tamika had already been living with the spotlight for nearly a decade. She was bold, outspoken, and accustomed to attention. Julian, in contrast, was unassuming, reserved, and private. Their connection was immediate in some ways. Julian was drawn to Tamika's charisma, confidence, and beauty. Tamika, on the other hand, found Julian's calm demeanor comforting, a contrast to the chaotic, attention-driven world of television and modeling. Friends recall that initially, their differences seemed complementary. Julian offered stability and patience, while Tamika brought excitement. Early life and rise to reality TV stardom. When a shocking murder case reaches the headlines, one of the first questions people ask is, who is the accused? In the story of Tamika Chesser, the accused is not an unknown figure. She is someone who once lived in the spotlight, who once charmed television audiences, who once posed for glossy magazines. Her story is therefore not just a crime story, it is also a story of a rise and fall, of glamour and darkness, of a woman who went from being celebrated on screen to standing in a courtroom, accused of the unthinkable. A small-town beginning. Tamika Chesser was not born into fame. She did not grow up under the bright lights of Hollywood, nor in the fashion districts of Sydney or Melbourne. Instead, she came from a relatively ordinary Australian background. Like many young women in Australia, she dreamed of something bigger, modeling, television, the chance to step into a world where people knew her name. Growing up, she was described by some acquaintances as lively, ambitious, and sometimes unpredictable. Those who knew her during her teenage years remember that she was very image-conscious. She loved fashion, experimented with makeup, and admired glamorous celebrities. This wasn't unusual for a teenage girl, but for Tamika, it seemed to go beyond mere admiration. She wanted to be one of them. In school, she was not particularly academic. Teachers noted that she had creativity, but not the focus or discipline for formal studies. What she did have, however, was confidence. She liked being seen, liked being photographed, and enjoyed being the center of attention. These traits would later serve her well when she entered the world of reality television. The reality TV breakthrough. In 2010, Australian audiences were captivated by the quirky, often light-hearted reality TV show, Beauty and the Geek Australia. The format was simple: pair glamorous women with geeky men in a social experiment, put them through challenges, and